What is up, guys? Four Corners is back to talk Olympics, to talk Nuggets, to talk a little bit OKC Thunder as we kind of open the first few baby steps into the long night that is the wide open part of the offseason where no basketball is happening. We do have football coming up and maybe some other sports to watch, baseball coming into the playoff stretch. The Rockies, if you're catching this live, just had an excellent comeback down, I want to say 6 runs, right? All in the eighth inning. So super happy for them. But let's get into it. I'm going to bring in you know him, you love him, maybe you hate him. Maybe you hate his takes. Maybe you feel like he needs to let go of his hatred of Devin Booker. It's Peter Bucket since '88. What's
Wow,
up, dude?
Ray, what an intro. Yeah,
You just gotta let it go.
Booker didn't change my mind this Olympics. Like, he played a fine role, but he was basically asked to be KCP, and he's a decent shooter, so I guess he did his job. But I got tired of everybody saying that he played great defense. It's like, well, okay, he had an easy role on offense. Of course, he had energy to play defense. This isn't going to translate to the NBA season. So, yeah, not sorry.
Some people can't even scale their role down that well.
Look,
Anyway,
if you're looking for Devin Booker credit, you're not going to get it from me.
I'm not. I'm indifferent. Like I don't care. It's not a big deal to me whether you
You're not
praise
worried
him or
about the
hate him.
Suns.
I'm
That's your
not worried
position,
about the
right?
Suns. I've never been worried about the Suns. I mean, look, they live in Phoenix, Arizona. This is a lot like the Utah thing. Is like I don't.
I love it.
They're gonna run out. They're gonna run out of water at some point. So, we've got bigger problems. To round out the three-man weave for today, a returning guest, Joe, not local, Maryland / DC based OKC Thunder fan, and fellow beardsman. How you doing?
Doing good, doing good. Happy to be here. Excited to talk some basketball and kind of the dregs of the summer.
Yeah, it should be fun. And we do have a lot of time to fill. So let's get into it. I want to start wide open. The Olympics are kind of wrapping up, and Gerald, I'll start with you. I know you've been kind of following them reasonably closely. What are some of your, not even have to be basketball, just Olympic highlights in general?
Honestly, what caught me and my wife up pretty hard that we enjoyed a lot was the fencing. Like that was an offbeat one that we like threw on at one point because one of the medal matches was on. And I got to say, the USA, particularly the women's epee team, they're dogs. They are such competitive assholes, and I love it. And just generally fencing as a sport, way more way more fun to watch than I would have thought, and also you get to like really flex on people in a way that I didn't expect. Like you're covered except for the one hand, so everybody has these big flashy gold bracelets and big gold rings on. They're screaming and ripping off their face mask every time they get a touch. It's good vibes.
Oh, that sounds fun. That could be like look, if I ever have my own bachelor party, we can throw on some, what do they call them? Kits or
Oh, I couldn't tell you. I don't know any of the technicalities.
yeah, okay. Well, it'll be fun. We'll try not to poke each other's eyes out. Peter, how about you? Any highlights from the Olympics at large?
I always like the track and field stuff. I just think those athletes are amazing. I mean,
World champion Noah Lyles.
it's a tough sport because those, yeah, I mean, they're working so hard for years, and then you get to see them for like a few seconds. It's a very quick. It starts and then it's done. So, but I also enjoy the teamwork of the relays. The women's one was pretty anticlimactic. We were just way ahead of everybody, but for the most part, I like that. There's an element of chemistry involved, and not just like who's the fastest. So that's pretty cool. But I do have to highlight a low light. Breakdancing has reached Australia, but I don't think it's reached it in the way that it was intended to, which was reflected in the judges' scorecards of giving the Australian breakdancer zeros across the board. I'm not an Olympic historian, but I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that that's like a record for a judged event. Maybe somebody's gotten like disqualified, but I don't know about zeros for like just your actual performance in like gymnastics or anything like that. So, the first thing I thought of when I saw this, Ray, you know what made me think of?
What?
It made me think of you because I felt bad. I was like, why is breakdancing in the Olympics, but bowling isn't? This isn't fair. So,
Okay.
if you want, I will write a letter to the Olympic Committee and say, this is a sham. This is a mockery. This is a sham mockery.
I think you need to do a little bit more than write a letter. I think you need to write a check. That's what they need.
So I guess my words will fall on deaf ears.
A little bit. But I do, I appreciate that you brought that back. You didn't totally embarrass me in public in the way of comparing me to Raygun, the breakdancer. But you also stole my low light. I'm not gonna lie. I did appreciate just how the level of confidence and boldness you have to put yourself on global television, not even national television, and really not have it. I think she's parlaying that into more social media attention, so good for her. And
I just have so many questions though. Like, who okayed this routine? You know what I'm saying?
Apparently, the Australian Olympic, they have a committee or something that approves all those things. So look at them. I've been told that she has
Is Lottie Devots in charge of the committee? Oh, now all the servants are going to come after me.
She has a degree in breakdancing. I mean, she's credentialed. So,
man, what a waste of money on that degree.
I'm too far into a degree I don't have to say anything about that. But what I will tie this back in together with, I really did, talking about the relays, watching China just kind of dust Jamaica in a relay race. I no disrespect, all largely off of chemistry, I think was one of the more interesting parts of the Olympics to me. Women's water polo, also very good, very difficult. I do not float.
I mean, the Chinese have a few more people than Jamaica, to be fair.
That's true. And they are very synchronized. Their synchronized diving team, also very good. Like, they're very good at that sort of being in unison sort of thing. So good for them. Happy for them. Yeah. So basketball, though, did you catch the USA Serbia game? Not to bury the lead. I don't know what is the lead. Is the lead the finals, honestly, or is the lead the USA Serbia game?
I was at work.
Okay, fair enough. Did you were you able to catch it later at all?
No, I watched a little bit of the rerun, but I was just watching the scores on my phone. But I watched the final, France and USA. I mean, I can't say I'm surprised at the outcome, but man, that's probably going to be one that Serbia is going to be talking about for years, right?
Yeah, I mean, Joe, I'm guessing you did end up catching that game.
Yeah, I managed to catch both the semis and the final. The Serbia one was definitely I thought the biggest scare for the States, at least, and frankly, as good as the France game was, like probably one of the best played basketball games I think I've ever seen. Like, just immaculate execution on both sides and super high drama, super high stakes. Although the highlight of that game to me was still, I don't think it was Bogdanovic. I think it might have been Petrovic. I can't remember which shooter it was, but somebody hitting Melo courtside with his celly, and getting Melo all riled up, getting LeBron all riled up. Just enough bad blood to keep things interesting. It was a fun game.
I want to say that was Bogdanovic. I don't totally have the full context for. It doesn't seem like it's beef because Melo doesn't seem upset, and Melo, if he's upset with you, he will let you know. He lets the city of Denver know every chance he gets. But yeah, I mean, I think that is, one of the best games I've seen this year. I mean, maybe in the last few years is accurate for me as well. I think it could be a movie, honestly. If they want to make another documentary about the Dream Team or whatever, I hope that that Jokic gets to be in it. His gross facial hair gets to be in it, and just the amount of effort, focus, intensity, dogness that a team can bring to a single game is immaculate. I would say I'm really impressed on their part. It almost makes me wish they could change the format from like single to double elimination or something where it feels. I feel like they deserve more than bronze. It is generally how I
There's
feel
not enough
right
time.
Yeah, with the group stages, that gets tough. And I will say that I feel like half the drama comes from that single elimination stakes of like, oh shit, there's 10 seconds left. Like there's a minute left. Like if they hit the shot, it's like we can't mess around. We got to go deal with this like right now.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe it'll just be like an emotional victory.
Ray, I just want to
Mhm.
I want to just give my 2 cents real quick on something because I feel like it's been a big topic of conversation that Kevin Durant was upset that Nuggets fans were rooting for Serbia. So I have held this position long before I knew who Nikola Jokic was. But when anybody calls somebody unpatriotic for rooting for a different country in the Olympics, I just think it's silly because you know how much I love sports, but it's all just for fun. Like Olympics is, it should be a celebration of people coming together and having a good time. But last time I checked, we live in a free country. You can live in whatever state you want. You can do a lot of things, and you can root for whoever you want. So I think it's too far when people say it's unpatriotic to not root for the U.S. I personally think some of the coolest moments of the Olympics are when small countries win. Did you see that runner from, I think it was St. Lucia, won the gold medal in one of the events?
Their first gold ever.
That's a tiny island, like tiny. So I thought that was a really cool moment. I don't think that the Olympics really proves anything about like world power. I mean, you can say, sure, China and America always finish 1 and 2. I don't need the Olympics to tell me like that we're a first world country and that we have a decent infrastructure and economy. Like we're doing pretty well. So I just think these sports debates are funny when people go to the unpatriotic route because to me it's too far. You can root for who you ever want. I think the NBA players are smart enough to know at this point that a lot of people just don't like them for whatever reason. So, Kevin Durant's been rooted against for years now. He's not new to this. But just because you play for Team USA doesn't mean people are all of a sudden going to all love you. Like that's like a weird thing to be entitled about to me.
All right. So I have a question. Joe, are you even aware of this storyline?
I did see this. I saw this mainly from Katie just trolling people on Twitter. Frankly, maybe his second biggest passion after basketball.
Okay.
But
no, please go on if you have any other thoughts.
I don't have a super strong take. It is like this is an excuse for everybody in the world to get together and not be like at each other's throats. So I think taking it as much fun as you can out of it is the best we can manage.
Yeah. I think that's pretty reasonable. Patriotism is weird. It's like a weird amorphous. It means something to some people. It means something else to other people type of a concept. And I think this is just one of the few situations where rooting for another country actually mattered, where there have been times where we've rooted for Jamaican track stars, right? Usain Bolt. We've rooted for, I don't know, people in other sports and other contexts where it's not so visceral. I think with basketball, the US is so dominant in that space and so accustomed to, feeling like, oh, yeah, it should be us getting the gold. It should be us winning it all year in and year out. It almost, I think it just hurts people's, to Katie's point, it's trolling and it's working because I think there's this expectation and built up sort of indignity. And I don't know if that's a word actually, but when it comes to the US actually almost losing a tournament and me personally as an American being like, cool. Because for the first time, I don't know, it just seems like there's actual competition. There's actually a close game. And we got the most out of both teams. I feel like we all won personally, except for, I'm sure Jokic didn't feel good about the game. But as fans, as the world, from an Olympic perspective, I think we're all winners in this context. That's all I got to say on that. Not to quote Drake's father, but yeah, let's. So I'll say this. Do you, Peter, I'll start with you. Do you ever feel like there's going to be a time where the U.S. isn't the shoe-in for the gold medal in any of these like international play Olympics, assuming they're sending their quote unquote best?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, Serbia led for most of the game. So I'm not going to use the word choked, but they didn't make a three in the fourth quarter. I think they just got tired. They got a little worn down. USA has crazy depth, but, France is going to be good again in 4 years. I mean, did you guys see how good Wemby was? I mean, he looked like he was just as good as anybody on the floor. He's going to be probably an all-star already next season. In 4 years, who knows, what rank player he'll be in the NBA. And, he's got a better supporting cast than, guys like Giannis and Luka. And, I guess Jokic is a debate, but, we'll see what the French team looks like in 4 years. So the world definitely is catching up. I know some people think it isn't, I guess, because we keep winning. But, I mean, eventually one of these close games just isn't going to go the U.S.'s way. I mean, I don't know if you guys watched the women's game today. They actually trailed for a lot of the final against France today. So I think, competition is good. So, yeah, I don't know who it's going to be, but obviously USA isn't just going to keep winning every gold medal every year or every Olympics.
That's fair. Before I give my own, I have a final thought about this, but Joe, do you have any takeaways, I guess, from this kind of experience and the trend basically of our lives that has been the U.S. always winning in Olympic and international basketball, but it kind of feeling like it's closer and closer over time?
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising to me that the world is catching up. You don't have to look to if you look at the MVP ballot over the last 4 or 5 years, Giannis, Jokic, Shea getting votes. Like, these are guys that are like predominantly international. I know Joel ended up playing for Team USA, but like these are generally not American-born players that are dominating the sport. Now, obviously, the depth of the player base, the depth of the roster exists, but I think things could even get spicy in LA in 2028. Because the thing is, where a lot of the look at the trio that really carried this home. It was Katie, Curry, Braun, and that's like they got the Hollywood ending, but that's the Hollywood ending. Like, they're like I feel bad even pretending like LeBron does indeed have an expiration date, but I doubt he's going to be doing the Olympics at 44. I guess I can't rule it out because he's a freak. But if those three go, then you start to look at the talent comparison and say, well, I mean, we're better, but it's not a clean slate. And considering how much better some of these other countries, these other teams are at playing on a more regular basis and more regular cadence and getting to a point where there's some real team chemistry built up and it's not just kind of 12 guys thrown in, and particularly 12 guys that only really know how to be a star and not necessarily scale down their role. I don't know. There's a real I think there's a real opportunity for an upset in the next couple Olympics.
I feel like Jokic's going to win. He's going to win one. I feel really good about him in 28 in Serbia in 2028. I don't gamble. I don't place money on any like draft betting sites or anything like that. But if I did, I would put a unit or two on Serbia Gold 2028. That's all I'm saying. He'll still be playing a lot of the, like you're saying, a lot of the guys who I think really lead Steph, LeBron, KD. Even I don't know if Joel Embiid is going to be the same guy he is in 2024, in 2028. There's a number of those players. So I don't know. I'm pretty optimistic on their part. And I think that team was so hungry to me that I feel like the next 2 years, you're going to see more attention paid from that side on World Cup basketball. And in 2 more years, I'm sure Jokic will just spend more time with the team. I'll say that because I feel like this is it's not to say the first time he's playing with them, but it is one of the few times where everybody's been together for that group. So hopefully Bogdanovic is still there, and hopefully they've got some guys. Nikola Jovic on the Heat. I know he's a guy I think could take a lot of leaps between now and then and be a very functional player for them. So yeah, and to really broaden the conversation, there's a whole bunch of teams that I think could be really good. Obviously, Peter France is very good. I don't know did Wemby have like the best Olympics ever? I wouldn't say that, but I do think it's a good experience for him in a lot of the same ways that AD playing international basketball his rookie season, or even before then, I think was good for him and just exposing him to a high level of play, exposing him to high levels of pressure, how teams are going to try to take him out the game, how he might struggle in various situations, because it took France a lot to figure themselves out, I think, to the extent that they did. South Sudan is actually the long boyiest team I have ever seen, and I'm so excited for whatever they have in the future. So there's a lot of bright spots, I would say. Sorry, go ahead, Peter.
I thought the international game is pretty well suited to Wemby. I think the shorter three helps him a lot. And if you notice, he had a lot of putbacks because you can just offensive goaltend. Did you guys notice like a lot of the American players complaining on some of them, and then they're like, oh yeah, he could do that. Like that is such a major advantage for him on the international scene. So yeah, he's going to be a monster in 2028.
Are we pro goaltending?
I kind of love that rule, if I'm being honest. I think the FIBA rule, I don't know how well that would work at the NBA level athletes, but I like even in something like this, most everybody out there was NBA level, and we saw only a couple of those a game. So I don't know. I don't think it'd be dramatic, but I don't think it's a huge difference maker. I think it's one of those grass is greener things.
I think it'd be fun.
I think it would significantly increase the pressure on free throws, because how many times do we see a guy like hit the front rim and then it rolls around and it drops home? If you don't swish it, those guys are like already in position, ready to knock it off. So it does kind of add a little bit of drama.
Bol becomes a little more valuable, doesn't he, Peter?
I'm not going to entertain that.
Okay, well, fair enough. In general, I did really enjoy the style of play change, just the allowance of physicality, the like we talked about the goaltending rules, not catering to every flop. That was nice. I appreciated that because sometimes I do wish you could just look at
That's the
certain
best part.
players where they fall over and it's like, hey, I know you just decided to fall, and that's okay. I'm not going to call a foul on you. Just get up and go play basketball. I thought that was really nice. To unless you had any guys had any closing thoughts on the Olympics, I figure we could switch to our NBA futures. That would be fun. And while I am very optimistic about the future of the Nuggets, Peter, I kind of wanted to throw it to you, and maybe you could introduce us to the conversation. Obviously, Denver Nuggets fans are a little apprehensive right now about I guess, the world passing us by, about other teams becoming contenders while we are losing players and having guys get hurt and giving out bad contracts and all these other things. So, especially when we talk about a team like OKC, how do you feel like, I guess, how do you, before we throw it to Joe in terms of like where we're going, how do you feel like we got here?
Sorry, you cut out for a bit. Could you repeat that?
Oh, no, you're good. In terms of OKC, talking about another team that is, I guess, what are the teams that we think of as on our ass, so to speak? Just how do you feel like we got here?
All right. I'm just gonna talk about OKC. I think that's what you asked me about.
That is
So
what I asked you about.
all right. So I'm gonna take you back to 2019. Season ends, and Paul George requests a trade to the Clippers to play with Kawhi. Pretty much, ending the Thunder as like a contender from the Harden, Durant, Westbrook. Thunder also trade Russ to the Rockets to get back Chris Paul, and they had a pretty decent season. I thought they make the playoffs. This is the COVID year. Chris Paul goes to the bubble. Obviously I should mention the Thunder get back Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, who had a good rookie year for the Clippers, and a bunch of draft picks, right? They make the playoffs. They lose in Rockets. I think they lost in 7, right, Joe? I think it was a competitive series. And, it was a good experience for Shea. It was a good experience for Lou Dort, who's still there. And the Thunder draft, shoot, I already forgot who they drafted next year. Anyway, Chris Paul leaves the team. He signs with Phoenix. So it's like clear that they're rebuilding now. They have a bad year. And then they select first round the next year. He ends up having a solid rookie year. I think that it really kind of went under the radar, honestly, because it was in Oklahoma City. But he was like one of the best passers, I thought, of his rookie class, and you kind of thought, oh, him and Shea, maybe we got something here. Next year, the Thunder obviously missed the playoffs. The next year, they draft Chet Holmgren, who unfortunately breaks his foot in the offseason. So, quick little side story. Correct me if any of this information is wrong, Joe, but if I remember correctly, the Magic had the first pick, and everybody was saying, are they going to take Chet or are they going to take, what's the guy's name in Houston? Smith.
Jabari Smith.
Anyway, the guy that was drafted, Jabari Smith. And then they take Paolo, number 1. Presti was trying to trade up. He was trying to trade up because, they thought Chet would be a good fit in OKC. And just take Paolo. Everybody's like, what? So Presti doesn't lose any assets and just gets Chet at number 2. And that's honestly going to be like kind of a fun debate as their careers go on, because they're both very good, both very different players. The Thunder also had a selection later in that draft. They get Jalen Williams from Santa Clara, who was a little bit of an older player and playing in a smaller conference. You know, he was rising up draft boards. A lot of people left him in workouts. He really blossomed his rookie year. I think really towards the end of the year, he really got a lot better, sort of that last week of the month of the season. So now all of a sudden we're kind of looking at Thunder like, oh, wow, this team could be pretty good heading into the 23-24 season, or at least like, you know, make the play-in or something. There was only a couple of national people that really thought like, oh, the Thunder could be like a for sure playoff team. Bill Simmons was pretty high on them. I don't really remember if anybody else was. Not only did the Thunder get better, they finished with 57 wins and first place in the Western Conference. And, you know, it all came together. I mean, Shea has been really good player for a long time. He's been an all-star. But this year he really, MVP conversation, which was fun to watch. He had best year of his career, you know, a lot of game winners, hit a game winner against the Nuggets, unfortunately. Jalen Williams kept getting better. And Chet, who was, you know, out his first year, so this was technically his rookie year, even though it was his second year, you know, just being in the NBA, he was fantastic. He was one of the best shot blockers in the league. I think he might have even led the league in blocks. But he was just swatting everything. You know, doesn't quite have the frame yet to bang with like the bigger guys. But, you know, then the Thunder get the 1 seed. They take care of the Pelicans, who were shorthanded in the first round. You know, Zion wasn't available after he hurt himself in the play-in game. Ingram was just coming back from injury. But, you know, credit to the Thunder. Dort locked Ingram up. CJ McCollum, he's not really the guy that you want to, like, have everything come down to. Thunder take care of and then they have a really good series with the Mavericks. The Mavericks were just on fire from 3. Yeah, I thought Shea played well. But yeah, I think that's basically where we are with the Thunder now. Now everybody's coming back. They trade Giddey for Caruso. They signed Isaiah Hartenstein, which gives them some more beef up front. And it seems like most people want to give the Thunder the favorites to go, you know, going into the year. So I have a lot of thoughts about where I see the Thunder, you know, the questions I have, but I'll just leave it open and throw it to you, Joe. You know, what have you seen this year? What was the year like for you? You know, did they exceed your expectations, and you know, did it sort of give you a different idea of their ceiling going forward?
Yeah, I think anybody that says that expectations weren't exceeded last year is just lying out the side of their mouths. Presti and team talked a lot that 22-23 season. They surprised folks even then. That was 40 wins, made the play-in, lost in the play-in, but made it to the play-in. And that was a team that was just a season away from really bottoming out to get Chet. And the expectation going into that year was, well, are they going to want to pull the plug on Shea? Is he going to play a full season? And instead, that's where he really blossomed into an all-NBA player. And the pieces started to look like they could be something interesting. But one of the things that Presti and team said going into last season and a lot of the preseason training camp discussions was, listen, we jumped 16 wins, 24 wins to 40 wins in a season. That is a jump that just doesn't happen often. We can't go into a season expecting to jump 16 wins every year and keep advancing like that. And then they jumped 17 wins and ripped off 57 in the number 1 seed. They talked a lot. The front office talked a lot about last season being a year of discovery, that they didn't really want to necessarily commit to one direction. And a lot of that had to do with their youth. Overwhelmingly, this is a team that is just young. Shea is one of the seasoned veterans at 26. And the rest of the team it's Chet and it's Dub and it's guys like Wiggins and Joe, and it's littered up and down the roster with first to third year players, guys that are on their rookie deals. So they talked a lot about it as a year of discovery and wanting to understand what it is that they actually had and wanting to carry that through to the playoffs to try and understand not just what does this team look like in the regular season, but what do they look like in the playoffs. And I think some of those questions got answered. I think I have a lot of thoughts on, especially the Caruso and Hartenstein acquisitions. There were basically two broad directions that folks wanted to go that the fan base was, I think, most interested in going. And I'd say most of them, a lot of the focus in the offseason was going after a bigger name star like somebody like a Lauri Markkanen, somebody that could come in and immediately have an impact, immediately feed into what they're doing that's successful, and really tip them over the edge into that number one contender position. But I have to say, I after being a little bit tepid about Hartenstein as an option that had been talked about even before the offseason started, I've come around a lot on the inclusion of both him and Caruso. I think what this team is doing is trying to model very similarly to what Boston has done. This idea that we don't necessarily need to have a big three in terms of assembly of stars. We may get there, we may not, but what we want really is we want 6 to 7 guys that are just starter quality. We want 6 to 7 guys that we can rotate in and out and change as needed and be flexible and make sure that critically none of our guys are bad. We don't want a single guy out there that has an exploitable flaw, whether it's on offense or on defense. That's the clear direction they're aligning towards, is this multi-positional versatility. And I think it's going to be an interesting season to try and explore where they're at and take in some of these younger guys and trying to build on what they did in year 1, year 2, year 3, and try and develop along that.
So I think that's really interesting. I guess as a follow-up to that, when you think about what OKC's focus is going forward, they made some additions talking about Caruso and Hartenstein. They're a little bit further along in their timeline. Do you feel like, and maybe to what extent, do you feel like that's going to create a level of tension between, I think it's one thing when everybody is young and there's no expectations, to the point that you're starting to hand out a few contracts. Guys are nearing that point where I think about a guy like Luguentz Dort, where you're like, okay, so what do we do with certain players? Who is our focus? How do you see that breaking down in terms of what shot distributions are going to be like, what playing time is going to be like, what prioritization of role is going to be like, and can the team sort of navigate that cleanly?
We'll see. The front office and coaching, I think, has preached process from day one, and the idea that they're not going to hand out roles to anybody and that everything is going to be very much earned. So I think that's something that guys have accepted. A big part of the reason that Giddey was traded, I think there was a real expectation that they were going to try to bring him back for another year. A big part of the reason that he was traded was because they asked him to come off the bench, and he said, where I'm at in my career, I don't really want to be coming off a bench, which is fair. He's a young kid. He wants to be in a featured role. And that's just not what was the right fit. I think they knew going in to get Caruso, and especially for Hartenstein to offer that amount of money. They know what roles they're offering, but you're right that there is going to be some tension to navigate, in particular because there's not even a clear-cut decision on who's going to be the starting 5 here. I think you got 3 guys that are inked in absolute pen, Shea, Dub, and Chet. They're going to be starters. They're really the core of what they've got. You've got your really kind of idyllic big wing guard trio there to build around. And the question is going to be how they best take the strengths of those players and maximize them. But that leaves some combination of Dort, Caruso, and Hartenstein that are going to start. Some combination of those 3. What's interesting is if you take Caruso and you plug him in for Giddey, that's an almost like-for-like fit in terms of positionality, the way they were playing Giddey and the way Caruso played defensively and even offensively as a secondary playmaker. Not necessarily the way that Giddey would have wanted to play, but that matches pretty cleanly to where his role wound up by the end of last season. So the simplest thing to do would be to plug Caruso in, bring Hartenstein off the bench, and then adjust as needed from there. And my expectation is that they're gonna roll with this game to game, week to week, month to month, see what combinations work. Dagnall is a guy that more than anything loves to experiment. And from a roster perspective, they go 12 deep with NBA talent right now. So they're going to need to experiment. The real question is going to be, this is a team that at the deadline last year got panned by some folks for being in kind of pole position in the conference and not going out to strengthen the team. A big part of the reason that was going to be a difficult proposition is because when you have a lot of young guys, what you have is a lot of cheap contracts. So pretty much every contract on the roster was either Shea with the max deal or minimum or rookie deals. Now we're in a position where this team is in a position where Dort is on a mid-level deal. Caruso is on a mid-level deal. Hartenstein is making a good amount of money. I don't think he's going to get traded anytime soon, by any means, of course. But guys like Joe and Wiggins got raises up into that $11-12 million range. I say all this to say that we're looking like a team that might need some type of consolidation at some point. And I think they will be active heading towards the trade deadline to see, hey, is Caruso good enough to make Dort redundant? Do you need two primo wing defenders? And is this something where you can say, what we could really use is another creator off the bench? Maybe we consolidate this and take one of the end of bench guys and try not to touch the pick stash, but try and bolster the roster and also do a 2-for-1. I think that could be a likely path if tension does arise. Although I know the organization has a ton of faith in Dagnall as a guy to be able to navigate that.
That's fair. I mean, based on what you've seen, I'm sure you watch him.
Yeah.
And how he moves specifically. Actually, Peter, if you have anything to add, please jump on in.
Okay, so yeah, I think you laid that out really well. I was going to ask you, I have a lot of questions actually, but I'm going to start with Presti because if I remember correctly, for the last 10 years plus, the only big in-season trade I can remember is when they traded for Kendrick Perkins. I believe they gave up Jeff Green in that deal. He typically has not made big deals during the season, which is understandable. I mean, pretty sure he's from the Spurs tree, and they almost never do that. So kind of that same philosophy there. So I wasn't as mad as other people that they didn't make a trade during last season because I kind of figured, why? Nobody expects you to win this year. Why would you do a short-sighted move now? Unless there was something really good available. But my question for Presti is he strikes me as one of those guys that wants to win every deal, kind of like Masai Ujiri. Masai did win the one title with, the going all in for Kawhi trade. But after that, it's kind of been rough. Presti's done an amazing job in trades and in drafting. But what I'm curious is when the Thunder are good enough and they're really close, but they need one more guy. Is he gonna be willing to overpay if he knows he can get a guy that makes them better? Do you have confidence that he would do that?
I think if it was the right guy to actually guarantee putting them over the top, he'd do it. But I think the tricky secret of the way that, especially with the new financial future of the NBA, is there's not really guys like that exist. Those opportunities might come along, but I think Markkanen is a really good example. They could have made a really big offer, and they absolutely probably could have brought him into the building. Without necessarily touching any of the core three. But if that involves giving up 2 to 3 quality high-level rotation players, maybe forgoing a Hartenstein acquisition, and then really tapping out the future draft pick selection, what that means is that you've lock yourself into a financial future where you're really focused on Shea, Dub, Chet, Markkanen, and that's all you're paying. Everybody else is going to be on minimums, and you're going to be looking hard at that team in 3 years saying, hey, we're second apron. We're second apron already, and we're just now handing out those max extensions. Where that really hits crunch time is once it gets up to Shea's next deal. That's going to get really, really, really tricky to navigate. I think that Perkins trade is to me really illustrative of the front office's philosophy and how it's changed over the last decade plus. That deal was made in light of looking at a young team that was on the upswing that was missing an interior presence in a time in the league where interior presence is dominated. And that helped in a couple select circumstances, but it was very, very shortly after where he was getting too many minutes in the finals and run off the floor by the Heat. And a major reason why that the youngest iteration of that team never managed to win a chip. The early splash on a guy like that and the immediate financial commitment to say, hey, this is the direction we're going, really reduce the options you've got in front. And I think what this team wants more than anything else is flexibility. I think that Hartenstein contract is a perfect picture of it. It's a front-loaded deal with a club option in the third year. So they're going to be at a point where if they get 2 years in and realize, yeah, maybe he doesn't like coming off the bench, or maybe we haven't figured it out, or maybe Chet's just good enough to be good and big enough to be a center on his own now, and we want to go in on being small. That's not only a movable player in a sign and trade. It's a guy that isn't going to be eating into your cap for years to come. So I think if the right deal comes along, Presti is a guy that's not afraid to pull the trigger on that sort of thing. But coming from that Spurs branch, they value much more the flexibility of options at this point and the ability to say, well, this didn't work out. We need to be able to pivot, and we need to make sure that we don't tap ourselves out in the process. Because this is a team that if it ever gets bad in a small market like that, it can get really hard to dig out of a hole. So I think they want to make sure that they, more than anything else, raise up the floor while they raise up the ceiling.
That's pretty fair. I guess one of the things I would follow up with on that is that, I think about Michael Malone, and some of the things that Denver has struggled with over the years is that he has been brought certain players by front offices that maybe they're talented, maybe they have potential, maybe they have a certain skill set that makes sense for the team on paper, but that for whatever reason, they don't necessarily gel with how Malone wants to play, how Malone wants to navigate the NBA. And we've come to find that there are certain traits that make someone a Malone guy. For Michael Malone, it is he loves playing multiple point guards. That's just one of the things he loves. Is it always a good idea? It doesn't seem like it, but he finds comfort in having that extra ball handler, even when it's a little bit redundant, because he hates turnovers more than I think he likes having, a physically imposing team or something like that. He loves he likes bringing in certain players with certain units. He's really been a fan of having Jamal lead the bench. He loves rookies if they play defense and hustle, and those are really the main things. If they're a guard, they have to be low turnover prone, that sort of thing. Talking about Dagenau and thinking about some of the things that the Thunder are going to be looking for if they do want to make a consolidation. Maybe it's a trade. Maybe they're moving up in a draft for a certain guy. Not even to look at anyone in particular, but more from a conceptual level, what makes someone a Dagenau guy?
It's this is a philosophy they've kind of doubled down on in the last 2-3 years. But it's pass, dribble, shoot. It's being multi-talented and versatile defensively. I think a Jalen Williams is kind of an epitome of what you want. Is a guy who probably is not, although we'll see if the shooting jump holds. Probably is not an A+ at any individual skill, but is at worst a B- at every single skill on a basketball court. This is a guy who can and has guarded bigs, who can switch out on smaller guys. He was the main defender on Kyrie for a lot and did really successfully in the playoffs doing that. He can pull up, he can initiate, he can get to the cup. The ability to read and react quickly and not stick the ball but also do all of those things well is the real thing. What's interesting about him as a coach, though, is I think he's less about an adherent of you must play this way and more of an adherent of you must try to play this way. Like, it's not necessarily you must have these skills, but you must buy into this system. I think Lou is a really good example of this, because when Dort came into the league, he was really just a defensive specialist who could occasionally hit some shots from the outside, but was coming in as a guy that had a history of being a point guard, of running offense, of getting to his own shot. And he has had to really scale down his role because he is probably one of the worst at rim finishers in the league. So understanding when is the right time to actually attack with fervor, and when is the right time to move it, and when is the right time to pull up. As the basic fuel of that offense is putting 5 guys who can pass, dribble, shoot out at all times. And you really just need to buy into that mentality. Some of that means shooting with aggression. Some of that means driving with aggression. Some of that means finding the right guy. But it's more so about the mentality of understanding which needs to happen at any given time. High IQ players.
That sounds nice.
That's the goal. And I mean, the really interesting thing is going to be how I think Caruso fits into that like a glove. Like, that's exactly the type of player Alex Caruso is. I think where Hartenstein will fit into that is going to be interesting, because he's a guy that can absolutely pass, and he can absolutely assert himself on the inside offensively. And obviously, it's a top line, one of the better interior defenders in the league. But is a guy that doesn't really have an outside shot, doesn't even really have a mid-range shot. He's hit a couple historically, but is not a guy who's going to get guarded like he's a threat from deep. So he's going to be one of the first big name additions that doesn't really fit that mold. And you don't have to look far into the playoffs to see how teams started treating guys like Giddey, who have shaky shots at best, to understand that there's potential flaws in that approach. But their big money commitment to him almost makes me wonder if one of the things they're looking for are different options. Because what I will say is the pass, dribble, shoot, constant drive, kick, re-drive, re-kick offense works really well as long as defenses are following along and sticking with you. But if they can help off anybody and just plant the defender on the back line, it clogs things really quickly. And what they don't have on this team is a traditional pick and roll threat. That's where I think it'll be interesting to see if they try and add that as a curveball, which is funny for most teams, motion offense like this would be the curveball, not the traditional pick and roll. But if they start leaning more into Hartenstein as both an offensive hub out of the high post area, but also just a true contact screen threat in a way that doesn't exist on this roster, I think to your question on what makes a Daigneault guy, I think it is more IQ than it is adherence to a particular play style, because I think they'll like Hartenstein because of his IQ and ability to play flexibly.
I miss that guy.
So, Joe, I love team building, and I love to see sort of what different teams try to go for. And, you mentioned that you think they're trying to replicate sort of the Celtics model. I find that interesting for quite a few reasons. So I think that the Thunder are building a big three with Shea, Chet, and J-Dub. Obviously, Chet and J-Dub are not all-stars yet, but they're young in their career and they're knocking on the door. Stylistically, they reminded me just a little bit of the actual the 09, the 08 Celtics with Pierce, Garnett, and Allen, because you got Shea sort of as the clear lead guy in crunch time. He's in the Pierce role. Then you got Chet, who's like this ridiculous defensive player, and he can shoot, but he's not really looking to force it on offense the way Garnett was. And then, Allen was a shooter, which is different than J-Dub, but J-Dub's a guard who's going to get downhill. I really love pretty much all the Thunder role players except one I'll get to in a sec. My biggest question oftentimes with the team is can you make that one move that you need to get over the top. And with the Nuggets we saw a couple years ago, it was trading for KCP and Bruce Brown, right? They had good enough stars. They had good enough, I guess like big money role players in Gordon and Porter, and they got it done. The two biggest questions for me about the Thunder are, is Jalen Williams going to be good enough in the playoffs? And is Chet Holmgren going to be good enough in the playoffs? Because I think Shea's good enough to be a 1A. I really do. I think last year was a coming out party for him. I thought he played great in the playoffs. There's no shame in losing to Luka and a team that was clearly going for it. I mean, Dallas, that was the definition of going all in. They pretty sure they gave their last or second to last first round pick for those players they brought in, and it was still a close series. So I actually got to see the Thunder in person once this year. They came to NOLA, and I was blown away by how good Chet Holmgren is. I mean, this guy is legit 7'1", and he moves like a guard. It's crazy. I mean, that guy can get a shot off whenever he wants. And the thing that like almost bothered me a little bit was I kind of feel like they didn't get him the ball enough. And I want to say he was at around like 12 to 14 attempts per game this year. So, good for a rookie year, but I really would like to see him get more shots just because I think he's a mismatch for almost anybody that's guarding him. And J-Dub, after a good regular season, he wasn't quite as good in the playoffs. So I know he'll learn from that, and he's still young. But that's sort of my biggest question right there. Will those guys be able to, coexist as effectively as they need to? Because it's always going to be Shea's team. But as well as the pieces seem to fit, I guess my biggest concern would be, is J-Dub going to be the guy that takes like 20 shots in a playoff game, isn't efficient, and then Chet was efficient, but they lose a close game and people start talking about that? And then the other question I have is, I just think that Lou Dort needs to be a little bit less thirsty, because he reminds me a bit of, if you remember before this last year, the Celtics had Marcus Smart for all those years. They remind me of each other a little bit in play style. They're both big body guys that are good defenders, but Smart was always just a little bit too thirsty. And they always said like, oh, that's, you taking away the heart and soul of the team by trading him. But honestly, he was it was a little bit like, because he was older, he was like the big brother in a way, right? So Brown and Tatum weren't going to tell him like, hey man, we got to scale it down. He felt like he's like one of the main guys. And so I think Dort, he's got the right mindset. Like, he plays hard. I'm not trying to say anything about his mentality, but it's just, I wonder sometimes if he should be on the floor in crunch time. Because you guys do have other good defenders. I really like Wiggins. We haven't really talked about him much, but that dude is a freak athlete. So I'm just curious if this team does become a contender, which it seems like most people have already put the Thunder there. I'm fine with saying they're one of the best teams in the league, but as we know, the hardest step in the NBA is that last step, right? To break through. So those are my questions. And I'm just curious, like, what you think about that, and how do you feel about Dort? Like, do you think he'll be a crunch time player for this team if they're in the finals one day?
Yeah, I think the Smart comp is a very good one for Dort, in that both Smart was a crunch time player for a Boston team that made it to the finals, but not the one that won the finals. And I worry that's where a Dort could end up being, and could kind of end up capping out at. Now, that said, I think what it'll come back to is a question of how it blends with everybody else's offensive, defensive talent. Generally, he did a much better job this season of scaling back his role than he has historically. This year, he had his lowest scoring season since his rookie year. Took the fewest shots since his rookie year, and you could tell watching him that he was just not out of control nearly as often, not careening to the rim nearly as often, and generally just taking wide open spot up threes. That was like about 60-70% of his shot profile was a wide open catch and shoot free, which is totally fine if the shooting leap that he took this year, getting up to 39%, if that stays legit, fantastic. I can absolutely see that guy being a crunch time player. He's also I will say, a fantastic guy from a star matchup perspective. He's very, very good at getting in and under star players. He doesn't necessarily have the length or the wingspan to truly bother some of the bigger guys in the league, but pretty much anybody that's in that 6'7" and under range is someone that he can really get into effectively. Now it does come at a cost, and he is fairly foul happy. So I think the most likely, yeah. But I mean, he plays a physical brand of basketball, and that's going to generate turnovers. He's by a mile generates the most non-charge offensive fouls, more than anybody else. Nobody is better at navigating a screen and drawing illegal screens. He does it at least once a game, and it's an incredible asset to try and muck other teams' offenses up. But it does mean that you end up, because you're playing physical, you end up attracting fouls from the other side too. So I think in the short term, if they're contenders this year, I can absolutely see him being a part of the rotation. And I could absolutely see this team making the finals with him in there. That's where I think the Caruso acquisition is so crucial, because you can take a guy like Lou and say, hey, play off the leash defensively. Play on the leash offensively. Make sure you stay within your role and stay within your cadence offensively. But go out there and get under people and actually really truly make them earn every point they want out there. And if you end up fouling out, hey, we can throw Alex Caruso out there and we'll be doing okay. And the backline rotation players, guys like Wiggins and guys like even Isaiah Joe, who took huge strides defensively this season to go from kind of a more of a turnstile to a legitimate pesky defensive player. Guys like Kayson Wallace, who has huge shades of young Drew. This is a team that is built to throw waves and waves of annoying ass perimeter defenders at you. I mean, it's one of those. Shea is probably the worst defender in that starting five now that Kitty's gone, and he's not a bad defender. He's a good, positive defender. So I think from a role player perspective and where it goes, I think Dort could definitely be a part of the core, but he will be probably the first one that they look at as saying this skill set is redundant, and if we need to consolidate, this is how we get there. I do think they have and I also have a tremendous amount of faith in Dub and Chet. Dub especially. If you want to talk about a guy that from an efficiency perspective, I mean, 54 from the field, 43 from three, and 81 from the free throw line, getting to any spot that he wants to on the floor. A mid-range assassin. I think he was one of the 5 or 6 most efficient ISO players in the league. And from a fit perspective, it actually worked brilliantly with Shea, where the rotations, the splits they'll run, it's a very old school star rotation where Shea will play the first 6 and then sit. And they stagger Dub and Shea almost 100% of the time. They have one of those guys out there to run the offense. And what that meant is that really fueled his leap this season, the ability to play co-star. Really, really helped. I do think the biggest thing that unlocks this team going from a competitive playoff team to a true finals contender is going to be Chet's offensive development. Already he walked into the league as one of the 5 best defenders on the inside, and is a guy that can step out and switch as needed. He's got the ability to shoot from the outside. He's got a handle enough to do some stuff. The big thing right now is that his center of gravity is so high, and he doesn't have a handle tight enough to really exploit guys in a face-up, post-up manner. So I think that the biggest thing he could do, frankly, is, and this is why I think think about the Boston comp so much, is look at Porzingis' game over the last couple seasons and try and emulate that as much as possible. In particular, I think he could benefit a lot from extending his range out about 2 feet. His release is a little bit low and a little bit slow, so he can get bothered and often can generally just not pass up open shots a little bit too much. So if he extends that range out a little bit, that's something where he can maybe feel a little bit more comfortable, not worry too much about the closeouts. He's got the range to get out there. And then more than anything else, start posting guys up in that high post, mid post range. And if they put a little guy on you, you don't need to put him in the back of the basket. You've got the touch on your shot. Just shoot over his face. Just use the length and shoot like KD, shoot like Porzingis. That's going to be the next step for him. And I think he'll evolve a little bit in that direction, especially bringing in a guy like Hartenstein and saying, hey, we got another rim protector. You don't have to be the only rim protector on the roster. You can try and take advantage of some of these offensive opportunities more.
I think that's pretty interesting. There's a lot to think about with the Thunder. Certainly that I'm thinking about right now, but I guess as maybe a follow-up, So, making this comparison to Boston, a lot of the time, I feel like teams are looking to change for the sake of a certain target. And usually that target being the prior champion, but sometimes it's in your division or in your conference or what have you. When you think about the changes that OKC is making to their roster, to their style of play, to not major changes, but like slight modifications to their ethos, how or what teams maybe outside of um, obviously not the Thunder are you thinking about when they're making those changes? What team do you feel like is the target? You know, if there's a target that they've got in the locker room somewhere, what team are they looking at and saying, "Oh, we need to beat those guys"?
If it's a we need to beat those guys, then it's got to be Dallas at least short term. In large part just because they exposed the one flaw that was pretty obvious on this roster going into the playoffs was the lack of rebounding ability. Although I have takes on that series and the fact that the rebounding disparity in the possession game was absolutely not what lost them that. It was that they shot the best shooting team in the league shot like 33% across the series, and PJ Washington shot 50% from three. And it turns out you lose series if that happens. The thing with the possession battle is that it reduces your margin for error, and they're trying to reduce that margin for error. In the short term, they very clearly are trying to address a tactical decision that Dallas was able to make in throwing out guys like Lively and Gafford and just abusing them on the glass and in the vertical the vertical spacing game. I think they want to make sure that weakness is cut off, because past that, I'll say from a team construction perspective, I don't know that there's another team that has a roster that should be able to abuse them in any particular way. And what Dallas did is very similar to what a lot of other teams would do that cause them problems. The way that LA played up in size with wings that could defend and helped off a lot of defenders, the way that Minnie would be able to throw three consistent bigs at you. The moves they've made are a clear way to address a particular flaw that they had that would have spanned across a few different teams without having to sacrifice the strengths that they get from the uniqueness of their play style.
Nice. Peter, did you have anything? I mean, I know we're a little bit over an hour. Anything before we wrap up that you wanted to add?
Yeah. So I'll end it here. You guys can both answer, but Joe, you go first. So as we sit here on August 11th, I kind of want everybody's like hierarchy in the West. So I'm talking about regular season.
Okay.
I do think this Thunder are going to finish with the best regular season record this year. I think, everybody's starting the season healthy pretty much in the West that I know of. They got the most depth. Like you said, they addressed the center. I don't see why they can't push for 60 wins this year. Second, I still like the Timberwolves to finish second. I think they really only lost Kyle Anderson from their group, and the only guy that's like getting pretty old up there is Mike Conley. But I think we saw that he's already kind of like scaled down his role a lot. I mean, he's never really been like a big volume guy, but he runs that team, and he puts a lot of IQ on the floor with them. And then I'm gonna put the Nuggets third. I still think that, I thought it was interesting that the GMs thought the Nuggets had the worst offseason. I mean, I understand why, but like they still have a 3-time MVP on the roster, who just finished the Olympics with the most points, rebounds, and assists. Never been done before. So if we have that guy, you're pretty good. And they still have Gordon and Porter. Obviously there's other questions about the role players, but the Nuggets have a extremely high floor. The West is going to be really good. So I guess it's possible if the Nuggets stay healthy, they'll only win like 47, 48 games and finish like sixth. But I think they'll win enough to be the 3 seed. And then I got the Grizzlies. I think the Grizzlies nobody's talking about them. They're extremely deep. they won a lot of games last year that they frankly had no business winning. They're gonna, it's a fiery team. That team they've been really good the last couple of regular seasons that they've been healthy. So I expect them to bounce right back, be the 4 seed, and then I just kind of thought Dallas was a flash in the pan. Like they were a good playoff team, but I don't necessarily buy that they're a top 4 team seed wise. If Luka comes in tip top shape, maybe he'll prove me wrong. But I just kind of feel like Dallas is sort of destined to be in that 5 to 6 role, along with the Phoenix Suns, who Durant played incredible in the Olympics, but he is going to be he's 36 years old now. Probably can't do it every night. They probably got to give him a little bit more rest here and there, even though he's this just basketball freak that can just play all the time somehow. They added a few role players, on the margins, Plumlee, Morris. They got Tyus Jones late, which was big. But, the Suns, they were a really small team that had trouble rebounding and defending. And they didn't really take enough threes. So we'll see how much getting Budenholzer helps them. I do think they're dangerous. I don't want to say they're completely out of it, as much as it pains me to say that. But I don't think that they're a favorite for like a top seed. How do you guys see it?
Yeah, I think I think it's tough to say for Dallas. I do think that a lot of what was successful for them in the playoffs might not translate year over year. I think at the end of the day, what they need is guys around Luka and Kyrie to hit shots at a very high level. And the guys they're counting on them to hit shots at a very high level aren't historically good shot makers. And it's silly that a lot of basketball analysis comes down to that, but a lot of basketball analysis comes down to that. And if a guy like a PJ Washington regresses a little bit from 3, if a guy like Najee Marshall isn't actually able to keep it up from 3, if they don't get the type of, frankly, miraculous Dante Exum season they had last year, if he's not able to follow through with that in a real way, I could definitely see them sliding a little bit. I could definitely see them falling back. I do think they have a relatively high floor just from if you've got Luka and Kyrie, you're going to be at least competitive in any game. It's just hard to keep those two out. I think my general tiers, I have some combination of OKC, Denver, Dallas, and Mini in the tier 1. I think that could change really quickly if we come out and it looks like things are just off. I do think some combination of OKC and Mini might be a touch above that Denver-Dallas grouping. But then after that, it's such a huge jumble. And so much of it is going to depend on how health shakes out, I think, for a lot of these older waves of players. Your Kawhis, your KDs, your Hardens, even some of the younger guys like your Zions that struggle to stay healthy. Does LA manage to get the same health that they want? The only thing I feel very confident about is that the bottom 3 will be some combination of Portland, San Antonio, and Utah. But after that, in that middle range, I mean, I could see Memphis finishing out of the play-in, and I could see them finishing in a top 4 seed. It's going to be interesting just from the amount of turmoil they've had and upheaval they've had over the last year, a year or 3, really. Are they able to really just get coherent basketball played week to week? But then teams like LA that won 47 games last year, I could see a real step back if they don't get the amount of health that they got out of Davis and LeBron. And I mean, hey, those guys are just only getting older. The only one that I would throw out as a potential other riser in there, I might be a little higher on the Suns than you guys are. I don't think that they're going to be necessarily a playoff threat, but from a regular season perspective, there's a lot of games you win just by making shots, and they got shot makers. I think Tyus Jones will help tremendously to organize that offense. I do think they desperately are lacking interior size, and they'll lose a lot of games because they don't have that. But hey, OKC won 57 games last year without a single true center on the roster, not named Chet Holmgren, who's not exactly backing down anybody on the block. I think Tyus Jones will help them organize. I think if Devin Booker can translate some of his Team USA experience into scaling down his role a little bit, and critically trading some middies for some threes, there's the makings of a very good offense in there. And I think Bud at least has proven that he is a very capable coach at getting regular season wins out of a roster. So I could see them maybe sneaking into that top 4, top 5 grouping. But again, after that, it's going to be an absolute mess. And really, I think it's going to be just a whatever stars stay healthy are going to be in the playoff race.
That's a lot of, I think what you're saying is pretty fair, especially the health component. The West is so close. Unlike last year, I am not predicting the Nuggets to win 70 games, but I do think they'll be better, particularly when playing for our core fan
How
base.
brave of you.
Yeah, no, I think the Nuggets will be better than they were last year. I think as much as KCP leaving sucks, I think Christian Brown will be a better fit overall with the starters, and that having Julian Strawther with the bench, having some not Zeke Naji at center minutes, having Russ involved, which also, Joe, happy to have you chime in on if you want to bring us full circle at the end. I think the Nuggets have a lot to look forward to and some internal growth to expect and some additions that will, maybe they're not world beaters, but they cover up some of the holes that they had. So to that end, I do, if I had to get my own tiers, tier one, the Thunder, the Nuggets, the Wolves, I don't think those teams, I think all three of those teams are getting better and in that way are going to remain the same relative to each other. I think it'll be close. It could be a game, 2 games, a tiebreaker, a division record, a conference record away from who's the 1 seed and who's the 3 seed. I don't see the Mavericks replicating what they just did. Like, I don't see them going to the finals. I don't see them being maybe they're the 5th seed, but I don't think they'll do it in as emphatic a way as they did it this past season, where they went on this huge run and won a bunch of games to put themselves in that position. I think that they've just kind of figured out some of what Luka needs, what Kyrie needs around them, and are taking serious steps to continue to provide that. So I'm saying like hold, I guess, on them, just maybe not a finals run. To kind of move down, the Clippers are a year older, and because of that, I just have to say it. I expect a step back. You can't promise me that, okay, this is going to be the year that Kawhi is healthy, that this is going to be a year that Paul George is healthy, that this is, well, sorry, not Paul George anymore. I mean, and that's a big part of it as well, is that like, are you even a better team than you were last year? You're not. So, they're bottom 4. Maybe they could be in the play-in. It really depends on how life goes for them. Looking a little bit, I'm Peter. You're going to hate this. I think the Suns are going to be better than they were last year. I honestly, the sheer amount of
I would
talent,
expect them to be.
yeah. I think are they again putting world beaters around their core? Maybe not, but just getting to league average, or the average replacement level player with that like 8th, 9th, 10th spot in their rotations, I think is going to mean a lot for them. Devin Booker, I do think, is a great player. I'm not going to say any comparisons or anything like that, but Kevin Durant, I think his game ages very well. I don't even know what to say about Bradley Beal. I guess he can't be worse. That's what I can say about him.
You know what gives me comfort about the Suns, Ray? Their starting center is Yusuf Nurkic. Well,
I don't think he's as bad as people give him credit or give him shit for.
What?
I mean, he's a true center. Like, there aren't even that many of them in the league at this point. And look, if you are one of the 10 guys who I think can be an option defending Jokic, I mean, that's something. Like, I got to give you some respect for that. Okay, well,
because he gets up to play Jokic 4 times a year.
Yeah, you know who didn't? DeAndre Ayton. I'm just saying. I don't know.
Well, if that's your bar, then sure.
he that is their bar. That's the bar that they need. They need someone who's going to get up to play the Joel Embiids, the Jokic's, maybe Wemby if that becomes a problem. Speaking of them, I
No,
think
I was saying that he's better than DeAndre Ayton. That was your bar.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think the Spurs kind of slide into that kind of category of teams that are falling and teams that are rising. They'll kind of meet in the middle there. So right in there with like the Lakers, I could see them being in the middle because LeBron is who he is. I don't know how I feel about the Pelicans. I don't always feel like they're in this perpetual turmoil
They
of
need a center.
they do need a center, but I also feel like they need some clarity with what is a team built around Zion supposed to look like? I'm not really we're half a decade into his career and I really just don't know what that means and what that looks like and what it is at a high level. So I mean, obviously he has to show up healthy. And I could say that, of course, we could say that with every team. The Kings, I fuck with DeMar DeRozan. I think they're going to be a 7 seed.
I knew I was going to get some Kings propaganda.
Kings propaganda, like the beam, because DeMar DeRozan is about to give you all types of reverse pivots. I don't know.
Beam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Warriors, I think they're going to be worse. The Rockets, I think they might slide up and take the Warriors spot. Like that's a 5-game gap when you talk about, you're looking at the Rockets, the Jazz, the Grizzlies, the Spurs, the Trailblazers. The Grizzlies, I think they've been...
Keep an eye on the Rockets too. They might go big game hunting.
Where?
They want to make a consolidation trade. I don't think they want to pay both Şengün and Jalen.
Here's the thing about consolidation trades in 2024. Where? Where are you getting where are these players coming from that are going to be an upgrade for your team that you can the only context where I feel like a consolidation trade can come is if you have maybe a couple guys who are like borderline max players and you want to trade them for maybe Giannis asks out, Steph asks out, Luka asks out. You got to pray for that day and pray that you're ready and pray that you have the assets to go do it. Because otherwise you're trading for Brandon Ingram. And do you really want to trade assets for Brandon Ingram?
Well, keep an eye on Jimmy Butler.
Do you really want to trade assets for Jimmy Butler? No, you don't want to.
The Rockets owner is pretty crazy, so.
Okay, well, that's nice. If they trade for Jimmy, I'm still putting them not probably in the plan. I'm going to be honest. I don't want to talk about the Blazers, and I don't want to talk about the Jazz. I'm sorry. There's not a lot to talk about with them. They're where they are.
Perfect.
No disrespect.
Nobody wants to talk about them. Yeah.
No. Sorry. That's about where I am with my conference standings. I do think it's really a 3.5 team race at the top, and everybody else will like find a spot. Some people will be healthy, some people won't. Young players will get better. Old guys will age. Some of them gracefully, some of them won't. DeMar DeRozan will be a borderline all-star for like 2/3 of the season, and then just fall off. So
should be a fun year.
The last thing I wanted to ask, I guess, is Joe, how do you feel about Russ in Denver?
I think I'm higher on it than a lot of other people are. I think he's miscast as a point guard at this point in his career, and really, frankly, should be thought of as like a small ball big who you can run as an offensive hub. I thought his defense in LA on guards was actually pretty decent throughout stretches last year. Obviously, the shot is what it is, and it's not getting any better at this point in his career. But I think he's frankly a more interesting guy as I think playing him across from Jokic is going to be I mean, he's a pretty good cutter. He has been a cutter at times successfully in his career, but that's really not his biggest strength. Honestly, I think the biggest strength is going to be staggering some degree of because Malone loves so much to platoon that as starting five and that bench five, to stagger him and kind of be able to run offense through him off the bench. I don't think you're going to get phenomenal offense necessarily, but it'll keep the ball from sticking, keep the ball from absolutely just dying. And he can replicate a little bit. If you think of him as basically just a small ball five and Jokic's backup in some context, I think I like a version of that. Whether or not he fully buys into the role will be a question, because I know he's had problems with that as his career has aged out, unfortunately.
Jokic is a fan, so I'm a fan.
At the end of the day, there's I don't know that there's a single player that he's played with that I'm aware of that actually disliked playing with him as a guy. And I think from a competitive edge perspective, I know it's easy to get caught up as a fan in some of the analysis, some of the on paper stuff, but it does matter having guys like that in your locker room and guys like that are really going to fuel you up for like the mid-January spate against the Portland Trailblazers that you're really not excited about, but that you have to go, like, those are the ones that make the difference between being the 1 seed, being the 3 seed, being the 5 seed. So at least having that in the locker room, I don't think it's a bad thing. And at the end of the day, it's a minimum contract. So if it doesn't work out, then you just move on.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think we'll see some Westbrook lobs to Westbrook, I should say. It'll be fun. He'll bring the energy on a Tuesday night in December, like you're saying, in January and February. So, yeah, I'm optimistic. That's about all I wanted to cover. Peter, unless you had anything you wanted to add, we can close out. Cool. Well, we appreciate if you made it this far.
I'm all good. Thanks for the insight.
And of course, Joe, we're happy to have you on. It's great talking to you again. We don't have too many Thunder friends, so yeah, it's great to hear the level of depth that you've been able to go into in this hour and a half at this point.
Sure. Happy to talk.
If you really appreciate us and you want to support the show, drop us a like on the YouTubes, maybe a subscribe, or tell a friend. We always appreciate new listens, new shout outs. Anyone who likes the Nuggets, anyone who likes hating on Devin Booker, anyone who supports Bol, this is the podcast for you. You can find me online at Raven Hackshaw, Peter at Bucketsons88, and Joe exists on Twitter, but he is smarter than I am and just doesn't participate, which is, I think that's healthy. You can also, I make bowling content on YouTube if you like that, for all sometimes hundreds of views on my shorts.
Future Olympic sport.
Future Olympic sport, pending a certain check being written by one Peter. Yes, I am joining the PBA this year, so that should be fun for me. Trying to get better, trying to work on my game. League starts in a few weeks, so yeah, that should be great. And shout out to our producer Jared, who makes all this sound way better in the post-production podcast format. Thanks for listening, and as always, go Nuggets. As soon as I can end the stream, we'll see if I can do that.